Welcome in. It's been a bit of a slow news week for midstream crude oil the last 7 days or so, 10 days or so since our last video. So I thought I would talk about Energy Transfer's pipelines, which we just released to our front end portal for clients and people that are interested in testing out our beta product to look at. There was a little bit of news this week, or recently today, I guess I should say. President Trump tweeted out about Keystone. He tweeted out about tariffs again. I would just ask anyone interested in Keystone or the potential Big Sky project. We did cover that in our last video, so go ahead and take a look at that if you're interested in that. It's covers that Big Sky project, which is likely to be the project and not a Keystone, a full Keystone XL project. Switch over to the map here, and you can see what I'm going to show is going to be a quick overview of Energy Transfer's pipelines. This is hopefully going to be beneficial for really anyone who's in the space. So I'm just going to cover them each for maybe 1 to 3 minutes. I'll try to keep things short. I know I can be long-winded. And just do a quick overview. We'll dive into the flows on some of these pipelines. Some of them are pretty interesting, and hopefully this 20-minute or so overview will give you some good insights on their systems. I know I learned a lot, even though I knew a lot before about their systems. Putting these together and putting it on a map and getting the flows on the map really helped me visualize and understand the systems a lot better. So with that said, let's dive in. I'll fade myself out so you guys can see the full map here. And we'll take a look at Energy Transfer systems. So these are all of their pipelines, and I'll add in Wink to Webster, which they do own a small portion of. And then we'll go through these one at a time, and I don't have these in any specific order, but let's take a look at the Permian egress first. So let me get Wink to Webster off of there. Their main Permian egress pipeline is probably going to be their Permian Express Partners JV. This is a joint venture between Energy Transfer and Exxon. Energy Transfer owns 88% and operates this joint venture. So as you can see on the map here, this is moving crude primarily from the Midland area here, and it grabs some at Garden City as well, and also some at Colorado City. So just to give you a quick look at what the actual flows look like, it's getting, let's call it 300,000 to 350,000 barrels a day from the Midland and Garden City area. It's grabbing some more at Colorado City. So if you look at this orange line here, this is capacity versus the flows in blue. So at the peak, Permian Express Partners was doing over 600,000 barrels a day. Now, some may ask why this capacity line moves up and down. Permian Express Partners uses their own steel in the ground as well as leased capacity on West Texas Gulf, another Energy Transfer pipeline, and we'll get to that one next. So the up and down that you see there is the timing of when leases come on and off. I do have public information about some of the size of those leases from back in 2019 and 2021. But to be honest, I am making an estimate based on some of the flows that I see in 2023 to decide when some of those leases fall off. So as you can see, there's a step down in flows. There's also a step down in the lease in my assumption as well. And you'll see West Texas Gulf's capacity actually pops up there because it's no longer leased to Permian Express Partners. So this is moving a substantial amount of crude out of the Midland area, out of the Permian area. Permian egress pipelines, typically pretty good with the amount of production, where we up to 6 million barrels a day plus out of the Permian now. So this has done a pretty good job of moving those volumes out. And the volumes can move over to mostly all go down to the Nederland area, where they can get to refining capacity, they can get to export terminals. There could be some that also goes up into like the Longview area up here, where it can go down to Exxon's refinery down in Louisiana. There's some refinery connections up in northern Louisiana as well. So this is the Pela or Lola pipeline. So it feeds some of that too. And just to orient, I forgot to mention, just to orient everybody who hasn't seen our system before, the green dots are receipt points. The red dots are delivery points. If you see an orange dot, that's going to be a mixed point, means it receives and delivers. And the the arrows are going to be flow points. The dashed lines are leases, so that's lease capacity. So what you see in the dashed line is actually West Texas Gulf's pipeline in this case, and you'll see that when we go to the next one. So jumping over to West Texas Gulf, you can look at, it's a very similar system to Permian Express. It actually does have a lease. I believe this is on Mesa pipeline, which Energy Transfer owns an undivided joint interest in Mesa. I believe it looks like it's used pretty sparingly, maybe a little bit more lately. So they are moving some crude up a leased line, it appears, based on the flow data that I look at from the Midland area. But most of the oil that West Texas Gulf gets comes in from Colorado City, this point here. So if we look at the total egress, like I mentioned earlier, you can see the capacity dip down here. That signifies the lease capacity, the capacity that got leased out to Permian Express partners. And then when the flows tick back up, I assume that lease came off, and West Texas Gulf has that capacity again. Similar to Permian Express partners, this is moving oil mostly to the Nederland area. We do actually have the flows coming down to there. So the step up you see is again a lease falling off and then coming off Permian Express partners. There is some that moves up to Longview as well to feed that. So those are the two main egress pipelines out of the Permian area. Between those two pipelines, and then we'll get to Amdel, it's a really small pipeline, an older pipeline that's on ETP Crude. They have about 1 million barrels a day of egress capacity out of the Colorado City area. So a really big system, and it's a bit of a patchwork system, but it still gets the job done, and it stayed relatively full over the past, let's call it 7 to 8 years. Move on to the next one. I'll just hit on Wink to Webster really quick, if I can find it here. So they own a 5% interest in Wink to Webster. This is operated, I believe, by Exxon. And Enterprise has an undivided joint interest in it. Plains has a JV interest in it. And this thing moves a lot of crude. So up to looks like it touched 1.5 million barrels a day in early 2024, come off a little bit. But this thing is moving a lot of crude, and they do have a 5% interest in this as well. Let's clear that out. Let's clear everything. Let's go back to Energy Transfer. The next one we'll hit on, let's hit on their Centurion system. This is a system they purchased from Lotus Midstream a few years ago. Just to orient you guys a little bit more, Energy Transfer went into a joint venture with Sunoco Pipeline LP to create a Permian gathering system, and we'll get to that system, or systems, I should say. But they did break off pieces of several pipelines to make that system. So the Sunoco LP system is NewStar's Midland gathering system. That was what Sunoco LP brought over. What Energy Transfer contributed was the Panther system, parts of Centurion, parts of Legacy Sunoco, parts of Legacy Energy Transfer partners gathering systems. So we'll get to that. But I guess the point I'm trying to make here is you'll see some of these systems like Centurion. You may have seen pictures before of Centurion that looked a little bit different. This is how it exists in its current form, which is mostly, it's a little bit of gathering, but it's mostly transport capacity, as most of the gathering now sits under ETS, which is the JV they formed with Sunoco. So Centurion Pipeline, historically, over the last, let's call it 10 years or so, moved oil from the Permian area up to Cushing. It's not the best if you look economically compared to some of the Gulf pipelines, like what we just looked at, the Permian Express partners, the Wink to Webster. The pipelines that go to the Gulf are typically viewed as more economic. You have a little bit of a price discount or price premium in the Gulf compared to what you can get to at Cushing. So these are dual pipelines that flow up to Cushing. More recently, Energy Transfer has reversed one of these pipelines to the Roosevelt area. So this red line here, where it gets on the Granite Wash pipeline, and I might as well just pull that up so you can see it. So this is the Granite Wash pipeline here, and then it can feed into Permian Express Partners 1, and then it can make its way down to Nederland. So that's one of the ways that they've been pretty creative to squeeze out some more capacity. So that's essentially Cushing to Gulf capacity that they've created off some of the older underutilized pipelines, which is interesting. And we'll touch on that system a little bit more. But Centurion moves, you can see back when pipelines were really constrained out of the Permian in 2019, it was moving its full capacity. That has come off quite a bit. So it's just not moving as much. And again, it's not as economic of a route, but the company's done a pretty good job of finding ways to squeeze some more value out of this system. It also moves some volumes out of New Mexico over into the Texas area as well. ETP Crude. So this is kind of a patchwork of kind of the leftover stuff that the ET just throws into like one entity. So what you have here is several transport systems in areas that are like kind of out in the middle of nowhere, I'd say. This isn't really in the Permian. There's some East Texas pipelines that are moving oil around East Texas. This is their Eaglebine system that moves oil down from the Eaglebine area to the Houston area. Amdel is under here, so I mentioned it earlier, that small, older egress pipeline. I'm making some assumptions on the flows here. It's difficult to tell what exactly is moving down Amdel, but they did add a new receipt point that is right on the pipeline more recently, and that has been getting a lot of receipts, so that's why you see the uptick here more recently. So it does appear like they're moving pretty close to capacity on Amdel. Some managed to get some flows and some oil pushed down this pipeline, which is good for them. A few other things that I would mention. Energy Transfer recently, you might have saw it in the presentation, and I think they talked about it a little bit on calls. They made a small pipeline to connect into existing capacity from Midland up to this Wasson area. So some of this was existing pipeline, but they made, I think it was like a 30-mile connection or a 40-mile connection that allows them to move about 100,000 barrels a day directly from Midland all the way up to Cushing. So that's allocated to Centurion right now. The tariff I see for a Midland to Wasson route and also a Slaughter to Cushing route was added to ETP Crude, which leads me to believe they have a lease on this Centurion line. So that's what you see here is my assumption that there's a lease on that Centurion line, and that's moving some crude that way. Not really much else to mention there. They have this Oklahoma system. Not a lot of information on this one, but you can see the receipt and delivery points on that. I think it's mostly moving stuff around to Cushing, just gathering in the Oklahoma area and moving to Cushing. Mention up here, this is also part of ETP Crude. This is the line that's moving from Michigan down and feeding some refineries in Ohio. So we can just click on the flows there. You can see that one's been very consistent at about 100,000 barrels a day, moving oil down, probably getting it off Enbridge, I believe, up here. That's a good overview of ETP Crude. We'll move on to the next one. So it's probably a good time to hit on, and I'll show you the whole system. I know it looks like a huge mess here, but this is their JV. They have a Sunoco now. So this consists of the Sunoco New Star system, as well as the assets contributed by Legacy Energy Transfer, Legacy Sunoco. The Panther gathering system is a small system that was added here, and then a bunch of Centurions gathering. So let's take a look at New Star system first. This is actually a really big system in the Midland, and it gathers oil in the Midland area and moves it to Midland Tank Farm here. So I'd say about 60% gets moved to the Midland Tank Farm, 40-ish% gets moved to Colorado City up here, a little bit to the Big Spring area. I think some of it feeds the refinery. So Midland Tank Farm, the Permian Express Midland Tank Farms here. And collectively, this system is about 500,000 barrels a day. So a pretty hefty size system, moving close to 10% of Permian production. If we add in, or we'll look separately at the Legacy Energy Transfer, Centurion, and Panther pieces. As you can see, this is a big gathering system, and it's likely moving most everything to Midland. Green, again, is receipt points. Red is delivery points. So they are delivering to other third-party pipelines along this system as well. The system does move some some barrels from like Pecos County area, Reeves County area, up into New Mexico. You can see that there. And then they collect some in quite a bit in New Mexico, and that system looks like it's seen quite a bit of an uptick recently. Moving on to the next one, Mid-Valley Pipeline. This is a pipeline that's, you saw Permian Express earlier, and I'll bring that one back really quick so you can see it. But Permian Express, West Texas Gulf, those are both feeding Mid-Valley Pipeline at Longview. So this is moving crude from the East Texas area. A lot of this will be Permian crude. Some of it will be East Texas crude. There's some refinery connections along the way. So there's some refinery connections up here in southern Arkansas. There's some refinery connections in the Midwest here. And then eventually most of the oil is making its way up into getting delivered up in Ohio. So if we just look at the flow points here, what's leaving Texas is about 250,000 barrels a day. Looks like it's ticked down a little bit over the last few years. If we look what's coming up out of Mississippi into Tennessee, you can see the volumes there. And then the volumes entering Ohio. You can see it's about 150,000 barrels a day. Next up, Bayou Bridge. This is a JV with Phillips 66. I believe Energy Transfer owns 60% of this, and Phillips 66 owns 40% of this. The majority of this capacity is under long-term contracts with, I believe, refiners, mostly in the Lake Charles area, I believe. So I think the terms on these contracts, based on the tariffs, are 5, 7, 10, and 15 years. Don't know what exactly is allocated to those. But this system came online. This piece is 30 inches, and it came online, I want to say 2016. Don't quote me on that. The extension took a bit longer. It got held up in a little bit of a regulatory snarl. I think that came online in 2019. We can actually look at the flows and probably see, right around 2019 that came online. As you can see, this piece going to the St. James area is pretty underutilized. The quoted capacity on this system, and this is a 24-inch piece from Lake Charles area to St. James, so it's a bit smaller. But the quoted capacity I've seen on this system is right around 460,000 barrels a day, 480, sorry. And that's for both. I've seen it quoted for both sections. I don't know if that's exactly true, but if true, this is significantly underutilized, this piece. There is a decent amount going to the Lake Charles area, where it's feeding refineries. So this is pretty well utilized, this first piece. But the stuff going over here into St. James are just, there isn't a ton of, versus the capacity of the pipeline, the stated capacity of the pipeline, there's not a ton of volume going that way. All right, let's take a look at Maurepas Pipeline. This is an asset they got in their SEM Group acquisition. This is also under a long-term contract. I tried to look. I couldn't find anything on how long this contract actually was. But this, again, is an underutilized pipeline. This also includes a pipeline that's moving kind of intermediate products, so non-crude products, up this way as well. So this is just the crude piece of the pipeline. And the stated capacity that I found was 460,000 barrels a day. As you can see, it's only moving about 100,000 of that. So something to think about when you see these underutilized pipelines, things to worry about or things to potentially see as upside. So a worry would be, hey, what if there's contracts for 400,000 barrels a day on this pipeline? I don't think that's the case with this pipeline, but it is important to think about if they have take or pay contracts for 400,000 barrels a day and it's only flowing 100,000 barrels a day, when those contracts roll, it's probably going to be a pretty big hit for them. But there's underutilized pipelines can also be a benefit, so an upside. So if flows shift or demand increases somewhere, or people want to be able to get, maybe this refinery expands or something like that, they could potentially be upside if more crude is pushed through that system. All right, on our way to Oklahoma for some very interesting stuff, said sarcastically. We'll take a look at Enable's Oklahoma system. So this is a system they got with their Enable midstream purchase, collecting from production areas in Oklahoma and then eventually feeding a refinery. So I've split the system into pieces because it is it's one entity, but it should really be split in two pieces. This is 100% owned by Energy Transfer. This is a JV, this last segment here with CVR Energy. So the refinery owns a piece of this pipeline as well. I think it's 60-40 as well. So this is feeding the refinery. I believe this is under long-term contract as well. So that's that. Not too much to talk about with this one. Go up to here. We'll take a look at White Cliffs and their Wattenberg pipeline. So White Cliffs is moving Denver-Julesburg production to Cushing. So this pipeline route has been overbuilt for quite a while. And if we take a look at the flows, you can see some of the things they did to try to offset that overbuild. This was a dual pipeline system. They actually converted one of the pipelines to NGL service in 2019, it looks like. Even with that, you can see the flows have been under pressure, especially in 2022. So something to think about, and something that I mentioned earlier, some of the creative things that Energy Transfer did to try to push more oil in some of their underutilized assets, was that system that was the reversal of Centurion that was coming down to Roosevelt here and then coming across on the Granite Wash system and then going down Permian Express. They do have a tariff that takes you all the way from the DJ area, their Platteville connection here, all the way to the Gulf Coast. So they're using this underutilized capacity. They're using some of their pipelines to be able to get those volumes down to the Gulf, which I view as a beneficial thing to do. Even with that, though, flows are still a bit underutilized here. There's some room for upside if we could see DJ production come up. You could see them potentially get some more volumes in this and make some more money. Take a trip up north to the Bakken. Let's take a look at their Bighorn, Bobcat, and Arrow. So they got, I believe, all these in the Crestwood acquisition. I think Crestwood acquired Oasis beforehand. So some of these are Oasis assets. So this is a system. Arrow is this system here. Bighorn is this system here, and Bobcat is this system here. So Bobcat gathers and moves the oil down to Bighorn. Arrow gathers and moves its oil over to Bighorn, and Bighorn essentially connects into Dakota Access. So you can see the big connection point there, where it's primarily feeding Dakota Access's pipeline there. Next up, we can look at Enable's Bakken system. So these are actually two separate systems. You have Bear Den is the southern system, and then you have Nesson is the northern system. This also does something similar to the system, the Bighorn Bobcat Arrow system that we just looked at. It's obviously gathering crude oil from the Bakken. The anchor shipper on this system was Exxon, likely still is Exxon. I think they did try to bring some third parties onto these systems. I don't know how successful they were at doing that. And then potential upside for these systems, I don't know how much Exxon has been drilling on these systems, but I did read an article a few months ago that Exxon potentially was putting some of their Bakken acreage up for sale. So if somebody buys this and potentially wants to drill on it, there could be potential upside to that. And I'll just toggle on DAPL again here so you can see the connections. This system actually doesn't, the Bear Den system actually doesn't directly connect into DAPL that I can tell. So the gathering happens here, and the oil is actually moved to the west, where it gets on Caliber, and then from Caliber it can actually get up to Watford City and get on DAPL right here. So just an intermediary pipeline. There is a direct connection, it appears to me, and based on tariff information of the Nesson system up in the Ramberg area to get on to DAPL. So I will talk about DAPL and ETCOP really quick. I think if you guys look at my last video, I did touch on them. In that video, but we can just talk about these really quick. This is a joint venture between them and a number of other companies. Enbridge owns a piece of this pipeline. MPLX owns a piece of this pipeline. Phillips 66 owns a piece of this pipeline. And Exxon owns a tiny piece of this pipeline via their Permian Express ownership. So I touched on it on the last video when we were talking about Big Sky, but the flows on this pipeline have been pretty good. It is permitted to 1.1 million barrels a day in at least North Dakota and Illinois, likely probably okay in the rest of the states as well to go that high. So there is upside here if you wanted to push more Canadian crude, like what we talked about in the last video, into this system. So potential upside for them if they do that. And then just to note, and this is one thing, like I always thought most of the oil that went into DAPL actually made it all the way to the Gulf. If you look, the flows recently are about 600,000 barrels a day. The flows on ETCOP are quite a bit less, so only about 300,000 barrels a day. So a lot of this oil is staying in the Patoka area. It's getting dropped in the Patoka area. So just a fun little fact there. Some housekeeping items. That's it, by the way. That you guys got the overview of all their systems. I'll select them all again so you guys can see. Hopefully that was somewhat helpful. We might do more of these. I'm testing out things that people may like. If this quick overview was something that you found some value in, let us know. We'll also do deep dives too. So I'm happy to do a 10 to 15 minute deep dive on a system. I think that would be beneficial in a lot of cases. And maybe that'll be tied to news items that come out on some of these systems. We are accepting beta testers if you're an a potential institutional client. Everything that we put out for right now is free. We're allowing beta testers to test the system for free. We're over 100 pipelines released now. You can see the companies. We don't have all of Enterprise. That's just a JV. But we have all of Enbridges is out. All of Plains is out. All of Southbow is out. Some of the JVs are out. Now all of Energy Transfer is out. If you have requests of companies you'd like us to work through, most of the work is already done. I just need to clean up some of the flow data and push those across the line. So what we're really targeting is 20 to 30 pipes a week to release, and we can do weekly overviews of some of those companies that we decide to release. And the goal is, based on my analysis and what I look at, there's probably going to be 300 plus pipelines that we can show in the U.S. So we're over 100 right now. There's probably 200 to 300 more that will get out there. And the timeline on that is hopefully within the next 3 months, everything's done. And then we can add new features. We can have tariffs for all the pipelines, at least for all the major routes. And then we'll add other stuff too. So really let us know what you want to see. We think that this data is really valuable. The visualization helps people learn. I know this is how I conceptually can learn things a lot faster. So yeah, let us know. Really, we're trying to put all the data that I had to scour through and spent hours and days and weeks to try to figure out systems. I want to put this in one spot for clients to be able to get to. So let us know. Thanks for joining, and everybody have a great day.